Hello, everyone. It's Caroline with Microsoft. We have a very special guest today who's here to share with us a deep dive into live events in Microsoft Teams. Sean Wilson, my good friend, is going to take you through all the ins and outs of delivering a great event. So let's hop in.
So what are live events? So fundamentally, we need to talk a little bit about meetings. Meetings, there are two types. We had the ones we just talked about, which are online meetings. Okay, that's this left-hand side. It's fundamentally around teamwork. Okay, it is around up to 250 attendees, one-to-one group video, as well as it's typically an interactive experience. Right? We do on-demand. We have the ability to do on-demand, but one of the things that's really critical here is that it's an interactive two-way. As we talk about live events, which is on the right-hand side, it's about reaching scale, right? And so we have the ability to invite internal, external, just like you're joining us in this. We have the ability to record it. We also have the DVR functionality, so if you have to pause and go to the bathroom and come back and catch up, you can. But one of the pieces there that we had was the ability to scale this, to be able to bring this out and do moderated Q&A like what you're experiencing. And because of the elasticity of Azure, we are able, in Azure Media Services, we're able to scale this at a rate that has never existed before. So let's talk a little bit about why live events are so important. We got to know the why before we understand what the different scenarios, right? And a lot of it is, especially now, we've got to be able to share information remotely with people that we could have either sent them email historically or had in-person meetings in the office, or even for our customers, right? And so now we're having to be able to inform in a whole different world. We're having to be able to share our knowledge, right? Look, this is an opportunity for us to do a boot camp where historically our boot camps are between 40 and 60 people, and we've got thousands of people dialed in to join us to be able to deliver this to you, right? This had never been possible to figure out how to get 2,000 people into the same location at the same time to coordinate this, unless we're talking about like Ignite or Inspire, right? This is an opportunity for us to get access to information, and it really enriches our collaboration pieces. So there's a couple of scenarios we talk about. One is the all hands, right? Like, Contoso has thousands of people. Now they're dispersed everywhere, right? They're all at home offices, or majority are at home offices. That CEO wants to run an all hands. Tell them what the update is. Share with them, Satya does this with us as a Q&A once a month, but hey, we want to know that. Well, they have the ability to use live events to broadcast it out to all of their employees. And at this point, they make it open for all of their employees. So then it's an authenticated gated experience, right? Great. Our employees, regardless of where they are, if they, like in this one, I've got people helping me support this that are from all over the world, from Singapore and India and the UK and EMEA and the US and Canada and South America. Well, you've got, and Central and Eastern Europe, and we've actually got people that are joining us from your side that are all over the world. We saw that yesterday. So this is great as an all hands. It's a gated, authenticated experience. Well, what happens when you want to do something like this? Well, typically, historically, you had to use a big old webinar platform that had high cost, or a streaming platform that had high cost to it. And it was challenging because to announce a new product or make this thing wasn't possible. So, hey, Hans, who's in Austria, wants to be able to get the word out. So what does he do? He actually logs into Teams, schedules a live event, grabs the attendee link, makes that access public, which I'm going to show you exactly how to do in just a minute. And then he's able to share that with everybody around the world. Now, I could have changed this from webcast to boot camp just as easily, except that it would have been our training and readiness lead in the US, right? So the other piece to this is there's an entire spectrum between these that we need to be able to enable, right? We have the ad hoc collaborative one on the left, We just spent better part of an hour on that. This one in the middle, this self-produced, right, is a great way to be able to actually get the word out, maybe do a tech talk, maybe do some learning, and being able to share it, kind of like we're doing here. We're self-produced. We do have some support that's helping us from the production side, but we're not sitting in a studio. We don't have a sound stage. We're all working on our devices and being able to deliver this. Yet, one of the things we needed to be able to do is also be able to produce this in a studio, right? What happens when I want to be able to bring in a CEO for an earnings call? Or I might want to be able to do a massive launch that I want it to be formal. Well, as we look at this, there's a couple of different ways to do this, and I'm actually going to walk through both. I'm going to walk through the one on the right, on the left first, because this is the one that when we start having conversations with our customers, they just don't understand. They don't realize that it's available to them. What we're also seeing is because of COVID, we're much more willing to get on camera to share a message, right? I don't know if you noticed, but we're using video in today's broadcast. Well, the reason for that is because we realize it's really important to see all of my facial expressions. We also know that it's important for people to realize that connection. But on the right-hand side, we needed to also make sure that if this was going to be a production-grade experience, that we could enable studio-grade production internally for a customer. So let's talk a little bit about that. So live events with teams starts with scheduling, right? And so the organizer coordinates all the pit, schedules it in teams, and then they go in teams and produce it. And actually right now, we've got producers and presenters right now actually going through this and helping us to make sure that we're getting all this information out to you. The other piece to this is if we were sitting in a studio, we could actually work with the producer using an encoder to send it directly to Teams. To Azure Media Services is how we get this out. Now, once we go live, we then have the capability to use that content delivery network around the world to get this to everybody that wants to be able to consume it. That content delivery network is a global network to distribute Azure Media Services content. Now, the reason we send it to Azure Media Services is what it does is it takes all of the encoding and all the bits to make sure that you get the right pieces and components and the right codecs and the right stream format for the device you're watching. Now, one of the things we're also going to talk about is what it means to use a third-party ECDN. As we start to all come back into the corporate environment, what does it mean to be able to work with the network pieces that are required for consuming a stream that is produced from the internet? And then really, what is the audience's experience? Right? They need to be able to watch this just like you are today. And they don't need to know literally about anything that happens from the moment it's scheduled to viewing it. They just need to know that it happens. Okay. So as we kind of move forward, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what the different components within a Meet Anywhere, or what we call a quick start for live events. I'm also going to talk a little bit about the encoders and what that production one looks like, and but what we've got some links that'll actually go and dive you into those in depth. Live events gives you the ability to schedule, produce, and present content at scale. Now, it's automatically included in Teams. Okay, your ability to go up, schedule a new meeting in the top right corner of your Teams client. You'll see a drop down. It gives you the opportunity to schedule a Teams meeting or schedule a live event. What it also does is it also gives you the ability to have the managed Q&A and has some key settings in there. And I'll actually show you what that looks like in just a minute, because there's pieces that you want to be able to set, like recording. Who has that? Do you want to make it available for download? Do you want people to be able to have transcribed information? So as we start to walk through it and scheduling it, it's the same familiar format that you're used to. The difference is we have a couple of key things that help differentiate it. One is your live event permissions, right? Your ability to have specific people and groups that can attend, making it organization wide, or in the case of like what we're doing today, making it public, right? That gives you the ability to choose your audience, who's going to use it, right? It's natively into Teams. It gives you all of the permissioning that you add your producers and your presenters right on in there. And it gives you that flexibility on how to, it gives you flexibility to not only be able to bring people that are familiar with the Teams interface to present like we're doing today, but it also gives you as a producer the capability to produce some of the key features. And so what we're going to talk about with that is what we mean by producing. What you're seeing here is the production layout. And the production layout, very similarly to anybody that's ever used production tools, you typically have a queue or a staging site on the left, and you have a live event that's on the right. So right now, our producers are able to see that they have, right now they've got, probably have Brian's video or somebody sitting in the queue, and have me with my video and my content on the right-hand side. And as you can see, I'm just gonna use my little highlighter here. As you can see, right here, you have the ability to choose your content. Do I want to just show all video or all content? Or beside it, like you're seeing here, is my ability to share video and content. My ability at this point is then, as a producer, I can send it to live, right? The reason that this is so, the reason that this is so important is that it gives the person that's producing the control to be able to understand who's in the meeting as presenters and manage it from that side. The other side of this, though, is we're going to show an actual walkthrough of the client, what its experience is for somebody else that's actually just monitoring from Q&A. But before that, we need to understand that people need to be able to attend this regardless of where they are. It's the same link to watch it that you can see even in the mobile experience, you have Q&A. You guys are all experiencing, guys and gals around the world are all experiencing this from all sorts of devices. And actually, it's really, really interesting because we'll actually be able to see at the end of this, because we use one of our partners, we'll actually see what type of browser you actually were watching it on. Like, was it the Teams client, or was it Safari, or was it Chrome, or was it, were you watching it on your mobile device? So our ability to bring that in is there. So let's walk through what that actual experience is. So as you walk through this, you're going to start the new live event, and it's actually going to ask you, and by the way, this is where you as an IT admin can enable or disable people to be able to do this. Maybe not everybody in your organization should have access to being able to broadcast a public event. Maybe you have it so that marketing has access to it, but HR can only do org-wide because they don't go outside of the organization, right? And you'll notice here under the quick start, you have the capability, and I encourage you to go and play with this. It's actually in one of the if you did get into labs, it's in one of the labs. You'll get to walk through this. But the best part is with a live event, if you have Teams, you can go and schedule and do all of this as long as it's been enabled for you by your admin. The other piece to this is that you will be able to choose those settings. Do I want the recording? What's my quote? What's my Q? Do I want Q&A? Am I going to make the recording available for producers, or am I going to make it available for everybody, right? As you schedule this, the event actually gives you a link that you as a producer would join and would have this experience, just like what we were talking about. Now you can notice a couple key things that I'm actually going to pull up here to kind of call out. So the first one is you can actually see how many attendees as a producer are actually in the event. Right? If you ever use Skype meeting broadcast, we actually didn't have that. But one of the nice things is now we have the capability to be able to see that. We also can see when we go live. We actually have 3 states. The first state is pre-live. And that means it's an intermeeting. It hasn't started broadcasting. Very similarly, if you were here early and it said event has not started, this was your capability to start it. And then once we hit start, it goes live. We run this through. We actually have the ability over here as a producer to have an internal back channel chat. We also have the ability here for Q&A. We have the ability to share content as a producer and have all of those functionalities, but we also have the ability to select who we want to show up in our staging queue and who to send live. Okay. So this gives you and this is a great opportunity for partners to literally be the producer for a customer. Now, one of the things that's a great example of that is you probably don't have the subject matter expertise around what a customer is going to talk about. So they're going to manage the Q&A. And so some of these you'll actually notice is actually from one that we did. One of the things that we actually have is a presenter has a regular Teams view, right? They have their ability right here to see it, and actually they have their buttons that would actually be overlaid. That gives them the ability to open up the Q&A panel. And so they have the ability to see new versus published versus dismissed. So this is actually what all of our Q&A proctors that are helping support Brian and I today are actually using to be able to respond to yours. Now, yesterday, there was almost 1,000 of these in here, right? So understanding that, you're going to want to appropriately have that experience. Now, from an attending the experience, even with live Q&A, you can kind of see what that experience looks like. It's going to be the presentation's going to be live. Over on the right, you're going to have your questions, and so you have the ones that are for featured questions or all questions, and then you have my questions. And the thing with my questions that's great is that these might be privately asked questions that hey, how do I fix my speaker or mic? Well, not everybody needs to know that you're having challenges with your speaker or mic. However, if they need to know that the presentation is going to be recorded, absolutely, we want to share that with everyone. Now, there's some other cool features that when you're setting up the device is really important. And one of the reasons that this is critical is that you can actually choose subtitles if you want them on or off. But if you're presenting in English, you can actually have subtitle, and I believe Spanish as well. The captions and subtitles will allow you to provide subtitles in up to 6 different languages, right? And so, one of the funny ones is when we had Skype for Business, their Skype meeting broadcast, we actually had, Eric had mentioned yesterday, I'm looking for Klingon. It was actually one of the supported languages. One of the reasons that this is critical is this is actually going to drive to your global teams and your inclusivity. Even if somebody wants to be able to watch it in simplified Chinese, or they want to watch it in Spanish or French, right? They have the ability to watch the captions and be able to read potentially in their native tongue. Now, at the end of the event, there is a whole bunch of information we're able to provide for you, right? The first one is your ability to grab the recording. You can download the recording. It's automatically stored in Stream, right? But if you want to grab the recording and download it, maybe you want to publish it internally on your internet site, or you want to share it publicly on YouTube, as Stream does not allow for anonymous public streaming currently, you'd be able to do that. Your Q&A report. So post this report, and it's going to take us probably 2 or 3 weeks to get through all of your questions. But we're actually going to go and identify those top questions and most likely repost those into Yammer, right? The other piece to this is the attendee engagement report. Who joined, who left, how many people were there. This is how we know how many people stayed and listened to me talk for the entire time or not. And then you get the transcript, because remember, it was recording it and captioning it. It'll actually give you the transcript. Now, just as a quick note, this is actually a great way to help augment the ADA requirement for closed captioning. However, this is not ADA 508 compliant closed captioning, because that is actually required to be at 98% accurate. And because the transcript is using machine learning to translate and transcribe what you're saying, it's not going to be 98%. However, closed captioning services love to have the transcript because it makes their life much faster and much easier for doing this. Now you'll notice here we have this Hive Insights, and we have a number of, we have Hive and Collective and Ramp, and I'll actually show you what their um, pieces look like, because it actually helps us it helps us um, with gathering some insights and some intel the other way. Okay. So one of the other pieces, though, that I wanted to drop into is to talk a little bit about some of the admin controls that you can see. And so in the admin controls, and we'll actually talk about live event policies in a minute, gives you the ability to have some policy controls, who can have them, who can't. But the other piece is that we also have some comprehensive usage reports that actually will give you the ability to dive into how many conferences were there, who was using it. And it's right there in the analytics and reports that was shown yesterday. There's a team live events usage. You can choose based on who the organizer was, if you want specific details, because you don't want to see them all, right? You also have the ability for some of the ECDN controls. But when we start talking about the policy controls, we actually talk here about what some of the key things that you want to be able to do. Do you allow it to be public, right? Do you use the default? Do you create additional policies? Yeah, a great example for this is, what are the settings for a teacher to be able to use live events versus a professor versus, say, somebody that's in HR versus marketing, like I was using as an example. HR, you wouldn't want them to be going public, because typically for live events, they're not going to be doing recruiting events that way. They're going to be doing benefits. I'll use a great example. We were meeting with a customer back in November, and they were about to start their benefits open enrollment. That's where they have to actually get all of their employees to make sure they've selected the right benefits information. Well, they were planning on doing 9 different of these events. And what we were able to do is, because they saw live events and because they were able to produce it, instead of doing 9 different events across the world to support different time zones, they were able to do 2. One, which was the full broadcast on the open enrollments, and the other one, which was in office hours, where they did Q&A for their 8,000 employees using the Q&A panel and using a form beforehand to capture what were the top questions that people had. And so it gave them the ability to do this. So it reduced their churn, reduced the amount of that, and actually provided a better experience for the users, because they were able to consume that information when it was available for them. And so so understanding live event policies, as we were saying yesterday, as Eric said yesterday, create as few policies as possible, but as many as you need, right? And this is one of those ones that, making it available for everybody to do a live event might not necessarily be the right solution. Now, to that point, I do want to talk a little bit about our ECDN solutions. One of the questions that we get on a regular basis, actually, is what happens if I have 5,000 people at my company, and they all are working in the corporate locations, and they all decide to hop on this thing. Well, 5,000 streams through your network, internet ingress, is probably going to impact your network performance. So we've actually worked with Hive, Collective, and Ramp, and they do 2 fundamental pieces. The first one is they actually do a peer-to-peer distribution at the subnet level. And so what that means is, it means instead of having 5,000 streams coming in, they'll bring 2 in per subnet. They'll bring it into a primary host and a secondary, and those ones will distribute it at their level. Okay. We've actually, one of the things that we've actually have the opportunity is, because they have that agent capability of distributing that information, it's also plugged in to be able to help us see how many people are using, where they're using it, what their experience was, are they having buffer experiences. Now, Ramp's a little different than the ECDN in the same way, is that they use a caching-based solution. where the collective and Hive use an agent base to actually make sure that it's distributed. And that brings back some great telemetry for you that's even greater and richer than what we have. Now, one of the pieces, though, that tends to stand out for us is people ask, hey, you know what? I need to be able to do a production level event with either with an encoder. I want to bring in more complex, or I want to be able to feel more produced. And so live events with Microsoft 365 does enable that, right? So in this case, you have the capability we were just talking about, you can produce it with Teams. But in this case, we're actually going to produce using the app or a device, right? And so at this point, it actually goes live from using either an encoder like Haivision or Wowza, or actually a software-based encoder like OBS, right? And a lot of the reason people will use these in production-based experiences is it gives you a couple of things. One, it gives you a little bit more control over production-grade audio and video experiences, right? It also gives you the ability to do things like buffers across the bottom while they're talking, or not buffers, but like overlays of people's names and pieces like that. And typically, you will have the capability to do this. So 35% of our people said they had actually done a broadcast event. Some of them have probably used these encoders. This actually sends it live to just the same as if I was in Teams. The fundamental difference, though, is that it's actually going to send it over the delivery, and that the difference is that all of the experiences at that point are all living coming from there. And so one of the reasons that this is important, and I'm going to stress this one more and more, there's two pieces. That encoder sends an RTMP, okay? Ironically, it's the real-time messaging protocol, but that RTMP is the same protocol that Facebook Live and all the different streaming platforms. It is the streaming standard that has been used across the industry for years, and it's a low latency, high quality stream, but it goes directly into the team's producer experience to be able to deliver it out. Now, one of the biggest things, though, about this is that because it's coming through that, you will not be able to, you cannot do a produced event through this to the public, okay? And I'll show you what I mean by that in just a minute, okay? So to dive in a little bit more about what is an encoder, okay? An encoder, basically, think of it as we're taking all the mixing and mashing that we are doing in the client and delivering it and all of our codecs and processing that in Teams and delivering that to the service. What we're doing is we're using that box to capture all the audio and video and however you want to pull those media pieces together and actually send that out in a single bitrate video and audio stream to the service, okay? Now, if you ever want to play with one of these without having to go and do a massive investment in buying one, OBS or Open Broadcast Studio is free to download. I use it actually for mixing and mashing when I'm doing stuff. If you've ever watched gamers, a lot of them that are on Twitch and things like that are actually using OBS to do their picture-in-picture and game captures. So as we start to see this, that's where you get that produced experience, okay? But this one that you're about to see is going to be a pretty in-depth eye chart. And so I'm going to leave it up for just a minute, okay? The Teams production gives us the capability to actually bring in some of the experiences to be able to deliver that, right? So I can absolutely take advantage of the best parts of Teams, right? Which is going to be the VBSS. Or if I have somebody that from an audio perspective as an internal production piece needs to dial in, so like phone a friend, they're able to be on that inner meeting. Right. And so if we think about it, you're receiving the broadcast on this inner meeting. We are managing this from the producer state. And so we're able to also bring this to you by bringing all the goodness of Teams. Now, if you look over here, where we actually have obviously VBSS and the PSN, none of those pieces will actually be doing it because all the audio and video will come from the encoder side. Okay. However, there is all the other pieces still exist, except the one thing that doesn't is if you want to play it in Stream, which is an authenticated experience that you can embed, or Yammer, you actually have to use app or device to do that production. Okay. All the other pieces are there. Now, the real-time captioning does exist for us, and this is actually the ability to bring in a third-party service. But recording, you can't actually record that in Stream because all of the production that's happening is happening on the encoder. And so you would actually record it as part of that on the recording. Now, one thing I do want to call out, I'm going to point this one out. This is like the one thing that actually gets us the most questions is, yes, the app and device production gives us the most flexibility from a producer perspective. However, it does not allow for public consumption of the live event. The live event that lives in Teams is actually the way that we can do this, and the way that we're able to provide this to you is that we are actually using Teams live events. So let's talk a little bit about some best practices. Okay, I've been doing these now for better part of 4 years now, all the way back to Skype meeting broadcast. And there's some things that we've learned. The first one is that make sure you've not only attended, so you've attended this, that's great, but the people that actually are going to be part of it and presenting, have them attend one ahead of time. Understand what the Q&A panel's like. Also, make sure you as a producer, and being a partner with this is critical, understand those tools, either to help your customer learn how to use them or you to do it on behalf. This is an opportunity for you as a partner to really set the stage. One of the other pieces, though, for this is actually making sure you're connected to a reliable network. That's why testing and doing this is critical. Now, one thing that is existing today, work on this. Once you start and you go live in a live event, okay, once you start that event, that live event is initiated and it can only be used once, okay? Make sure that as you do this, there's some other best practices I'm about to give you, namely the one that I love, which is the second one on this page, which is considering using a redirection URL. You'll notice that we will use ak.ms at Microsoft. The reason that we use this is because if something ever happens to the original meeting URL, we can obviously switch it out quickly, unbeknownst to you, so that you're not impacted, right? There's a couple of things to also recognize, and that is that, you know, with the event team that you've got, make sure people know what their roles are, what they're doing, who's doing what. Before this, we actually had a kickoff with just the Q&A proctors and then one for the speakers, just so that people knew how to use the Q&A panel, but also who knew how to do this from producing, who was presenting, what's those transitions like. Now, one of the things that we also want to make sure is that you start the meeting before you get going. So like this meeting, we were all on 30 minutes before with the production team and the presenters, and then, you know, as our Q&A panel, they showed up probably, you know, 10 to 15 minutes ahead of time. Now, one of the things you can do is actually start the broadcast about 10 minutes ahead of time and have everybody muted. Okay. That is one of the pieces that you can do. Obviously, the one we did today, we started right on the bat because we had 3.5 hours. We wanted to just get people going and get moving. Now, the other piece to this is opening up some other tips and tricks. Making sure that you're muting all notifications. I actually was getting notifications before we got on this. I saw people liking things that I was mentioning. I'm like, uh-oh, we're going to have challenges there. And so one of the things that we want to do is make sure that you're actually able to do that. The other piece to this that I want to do is making sure that the audio that's part of this is coming on a certified device. The piece with this that I was talking about before, and we talked about certified devices and actually why that was so important, was fundamentally because if you got a whole bunch of background noise, or my dog's barking, or the fact that you were getting echo because it wasn't a certified device, the experience in the far end would be quite poor. The other piece is make sure you're using the right lighting. There's nothing worse than a camera that can't focus on you because it's too dark. And we've had this where we'll be in conversations and it's the middle of the night where we're presenting and people's lights in the room aren't bright enough, and so the camera is trying to support for that. So just understand that there are some tips and tricks around doing this. One, about the delay. What I produce and what you receive is about 7 to 20 seconds delayed. The reason is it goes up to the cloud and then it's encoded. And once it's finished encoding, it's then distributed across that content delivery network. And so it's having to make it all the way around the world, but they're also doing the transcription. They're also being able to do the captioning in real time. So all of that's processing is happening. So the fundamental question that we get is who can use live events? Now, who can create them versus who can watch them, right? It has to be granted from the admin. I showed that. But then any of the ESKUs, 1, 3, or 5, and then the education, so academic 3 or academic 5, they do need to have the stream license enabled to produce, okay? And to record. The Yammer events are a very different experience. And I'll actually give you a link at the end of this that you can actually go and dive into if that's how you want to do it. And people are using it. And we do our Q&A with Satya, our CEO, over Yammer, because we have a living conversation that goes on for the month, and then they do Q&A that way versus it being a standardized event like this. One of the things, though, that you'll need, viewers will need a valid license only if it's authenticated. Okay, they need to have at least E1 if they're going to do an authenticated experience. The team produced events, I can share with you anonymously. So if you don't have a Teams license, I can send it out to you. You can actually consume this. You actually will either join it through a federated experience or an anonymous join and be able to consume it. Now, one of the questions that we get is, what is the delivery content within the network cost, right? What is the bandwidth cost? And so this is actually what will actually be live bit rates at its max, not as its norm. And what you'll actually see is, like right now, bandwidth requirement is very small because I'm not changing the screen. My video feed is actually quite small, and so the impact of the network is actually is reduced. Those ECDN solutions I was talking about are really important if I'm having to work on a corporate network. We've got constricted ingress. We know we're going to have a lot of support and use there. I want to make sure that that's the case. Now, I'm going to share this slide, and in just a minute, while we're taking a break, I will actually copy these into the broadcast for you to be able to get into the experience.
So that's it from Sean. Check out these great resources, and of course, join us at adoption.microsoft.com to learn about all things virtual events, Microsoft Teams, live events, and more.